Hey guys, welcome to today's lesson. Today we are talking about direct variation. I know that this might be a new and unfamiliar concept to you, but all direct variation is the pattern when one thing goes up, the other thing goes up. So this says y varies directly as x, so this means when y goes up, x goes up. When y goes down, x also goes down. So let's look at a formal definition. Pause the video and write this down. A direct variation is a situation in which two quantities increase or decrease at the same rate. What does that mean? So, when two quantities increase or decrease, go up or go down at the same rate, meaning they go up together or they go down together. So, an example would be a mechanic who is paid hourly knows that working longer means making more money. That is because his pay varies directly as the number of hours worked. So we can say that he gets paid the same amount each hour. So the more hours he works, so does the amount that he gets paid. So if he works more hours, he makes more money. If he works less hours, he makes less money. Easy as that. Let's look at one thing. One thing I want you to remember. You can write this down 1,000 times. This will help you on your tests for STAR through this PowerPoint. It is so important. Time, whenever we see time, minutes, hours, anything like that, time is always X. Okay? Time is always X. And money is always Y. So if we have a graph, we know which one is going to be our X. Time is always going to be our X, and money is always going to be our Y. Or like on a table, time will always be X, money will always be Y. Okay? And another way you can remember this is look at this. Money has a Y in it, and it's always Y, okay? Time is X, money is Y. I'm going to repeat that a lot. So let's look at an example. Example 1. The total pay a person earns varies directly with the hours worked. If a person works 8 hours and the total pay is $72, how much will he get paid if he works 40 hours? Well, okay, let's stop and look at what we know. If it varies directly, we know that when hours goes up, the money will go up, okay? So, we know if we're trying to set up a proportion, X and Y, X goes on top, Y goes on the bottom, we know X is always time. If we look here, if a person works 8 hours, the total pay is $72. Hours is time, so that means 8 is our X, okay? Which means $72, that is money, that's going to go for our Y. Here's our first proportion, but we're not done yet because it's asking us a question. It says, how much will he get paid if he works 40 hours? So now we know, okay, we're given 40 hours. 40 is time, so it goes in the X. And we need to find how much will he get paid. So we need to find his Y. So what we're going to do to solve for Y is we are going to cross multiply like this. This might be something you remember from 7th grade algebra, or this might be something that is new to you. But we're going to cross multiply to solve for Y. So we're first going to find 72 times 40. Let me get my calculator. 72 times 40 equals 2,880. 2,880. And when we when we multiply 8, whoops, let me switch the color. When we multiply 8 times Y, when we combine a number with a variable by multiplying it, we're just going to be left with 8Y, okay? So 2,880 equals 8Y. Now, we're not done. We want to get the Y by itself, so what do? We're going to divide by 8 on both sides because that will cross out the 8 here, leaving the y by itself. So 2,880 divided by 8 in our calculator. When we type that in, we get 360. So now we know that y equals 360. Okay? That's it. We're done. We solved our y. So we know how much will he get paid if he works 40 hours? He will get paid $360. Here is example 2. It's the same process. Let's take a look. The distance you travel at a constant speed varies directly with the time spent traveling. So this time we're looking at distance and time. It takes you 6 hours. Okay. It takes you 6 hours to travel 360 miles. So let's just write what we know first. Let's set up our proportion, our x-y proportion. We know x is time, and we know it takes us 6 hours. Hours is time, so we're going to write 6 for x, and that leaves our 360 miles for y. So 360 is y. Here's our first proportion. But it's asking us how many hours will it take you to travel 480 miles? So this time, it's asking us to solve the x, because x is time, and we're trying to find how many hours it takes us to travel 480 miles. So look, it's exact same kind of proportion. So what are we going to do to solve for x? The exact same thing. We are going to cross multiply 6 times 480, and we're going to cross multiply 360 times x. So let's look at our calculator. Clear. 6 times 480 equals, hey, that's the same number from before. 2,880. 2,880 equals 360 times x is just 360x. So if we want to get the x by itself, what we're going to do is we're going to divide by 360, because then that cancels out our x, and we're going to divide by 360 here. So we know that x equals, right, because x is by itself, x equals 2,880 divided by 360, and we get 8. So x equals 8. So when it says, how many hours will it take you to travel 480 miles? It will take us 8 hours. This problem on your own and see if your answers compare to mine. So this is my work. I'll quickly explain the steps I did. I set up my x and y proportion. If I know I mow 6 yards and I make $250, I know money is my y, so I put 250 in the y, and that means I had to put the 6 in the x. So I have 6 over 250, and it's asking me how much money, so it's asking me to find my y, if I'm only mowing 2 yards. So I set up another proportion, 2 over y, and then I cross multiply my proportions, and I get 250 times 2 equals 500. 6 times y equals 6y. To get the y by itself, I divide by 6 on both sides, and then I have y equals 500 divided by 6. And when I type that in my calculator, I get $83.33. So this one, instead of both things going up, this one had both x and y going down. So 2 yards goes down, so the price goes down. Okay, next one. Here's a different example. I think this is actually easier because we have less words. If y varies directly as x and y equals 44 when x equals 11, what is y when x equals 20? So if we set up our xy proportions like we always do, we have x is 11 and y is 44. Now, what is y? We don't know what y is. What is y when x is 20? We're going to do the same thing. Cross multiply. 44 times 20, let's see what that is. Clear. 44 times 20 is 880. 880. And that equals 11 times y, which is 11y. So 880 equals 11y. To get the y by itself, I divide by 11 on both sides, because now the 11 is canceled out. And I'm just stuck with my y. 880 divided by 11 equals y. And so I know that y equals 80. Done. That's it. Let's try another example. This example is very similar to the one before. Exact same process, just different numbers. Don't let these numbers scare you. It's the exact same thing, I promise you. Because let's look. If y varies directly as x, same thing, and y is 25 hundredths and x is 10 1/2, what is x when y is 5? Well, let's set up what we know, like what we usually do. We have our x and y proportion. We know y is 25 hundredths. And we know x, if we want to write this as a decimal, 10 1/2, is just the same as 10.5, or 10 5 tenths, right? 10 5 tenths. So here's our first proportion. Now, what is x? We're trying to find x when y is 5. We're going to do the exact same thing that we have always done. We're going to cross multiply 10.5 times 5 and 0.25 times x. Okay? So, when we type it into our calculator, 10.5 times 5, we get 52.5. So let's see. 52.5. And we could say that that equals x times 2.5. When we combine those two numbers, all we have, I'll do that in the same color, is 0.25 x, right? We're just combining it. Now to get the x by itself, we just divide by 0.25 on both sides. What we do to one side, we have to do to the other. And when we take 52.5 divided by 25 hundredths, we get x equals 210. Let me write that down. X equals 210. That's it. This next problem on your own, pause the video, work it out, and see if your answer compares to mine. Okay, so the way I set up this problem was I set up my proportion, and then I set up my first proportion. If x and y vary directly, and y is 20 and x is 6, I have 6 over 20. And we're solving for x when y is 30, so I cross multiply. 30 times 6 is 180, equals 20x, because 20 times x is just 20x. I divide by 20 on both sides, and I get x equals 9. That's it. The very last couple things to remember to wrap up this lesson. When you see varies directly, you need to remember that the first thing you do is organize your information on a table or on a proportion, okay? X is always on top no matter what, for a proportion or for a table. The next step you do is cross multiply, divide, and then you find your missing variable. That's it, guys. Please message me or Ms. Jongward if you have any questions at all, and I'll see you guys in class. Bye!